Ah, Halloween, the midpoint between autumn and winter. A time for terror and laughter. A time where accepting candy from strangers is okay. And most importantly, gambling. Halloween is also the one time of year where the Team Fortress 2 community is truly united. Whether it be fooling around with the wacky spells or checking out all the new fun maps and cosmetics, when Scream Fortress rolls around, there's a little bit of everything for players to enjoy. And with the annual event entering its 15th year this October, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at one year in particular, not because of any of the content it added, but for the ripple effect it had on both the TF2 community and Valve. So when TF2 was at one of its lowest points ever, how did one fairly unassuming update beat the odds to save one of the most influential shooters of all time? But first, a history lesson. 2020 is not where our story starts. We need to rewind 11 years to October 2009, when Valve released the first ever Scream Fortress event. Although, back then, it wasn't called Scream Fortress, rather the Haunted Halloween Special. And compared to the massive scale of future events, the first Scream Fortress did not have a ton of content. Just a couple of hats, achievements, and Koth Harvest. It was received fairly positively from the community and sparked a desire for more, and next year, Valve sure did give them more. On October 27th, 2010, the second Scream Fortress event was released, and for the first time in the game's history, a boss fight was added. The terrifying horseless, headless Horseman. CP_Man Manor, a Halloween-themed version of Mountain Lab, was the second Halloween map ever added to the game, and it was truly iconic. It starts off playing like a normal game of TF2, however, every once in a while the HHH made an appearance and everyone stopped to fight him. This was before the time of the Conga and the Kazatsky kick, so Scream Fortress 2010 was probably one of the first instances of casual games turning friendly. Next year's edition will build on that with the introduction of Monoculus, which, I'll be honest, just isn't as fun as the boss fight as the HHH was. But in preparation for next year's event, Gabe and the team were cooking something truly special. That something would completely change TF2's Halloween events forever. The 4th annual Scream Fortress was the biggest event yet, adding the final and most annoying boss. You all know his name, and he needs no introduction. A Halloweenified version of Lakeside transforms a great map into a great Halloween map. The Pit of Death and the Wheel of Fate create a truly unique take on King of the Hill. Unfortunately, Rasmus kind of ruins the map. He just shows up too damn often and rounds can take up to 30 minutes. Fortunately, this update had a heap of other content, including introducing cosmetic magic spells, a special Halloween MVM mission, and more Halloween cosmetics. After 2012, we still got some great content, including the legendary Hell Tower. However, we did start to see a shift in how the updates were dropped. Valve did their job early on, and we were rewarded with some of the best updates TF2 has ever received. We saw the shift of Valve handing over the majority of update production to the community. This turned out to be a great decision because the community has produced some of the craziest thing I've ever seen in TF2 because Scream Fortress allows that freedom to create. It's that one time of year where the community can show off their passion and creativity as well as being the closest TF2 gets to a major update. But despite a rich history, something was going wrong. For the first time in TF2's history, the game was in serious trouble. Player numbers were declining daily and the seasonal events seemed to be doing very little to help. Team Fortress 2 had a problem. Team Fortress 2 was dying. 2020 seemed to be the beginning of the end for TF2. A lack of communication from Valve over the absence of any major updates since 2017 caused unrest within the community. And the community was still recovering from an economic crisis in 2019 where certain crates had a guaranteed chance of granting the player an unusual cosmetic. While Valve acted quick enough to prevent any long-lasting problems to the game's economy, it casted doubt on the future of the game. But most notably, a serious botting problem seemed to be taking hold of this beloved game. Botting is when one person creates multiple accounts run by robots to disrupt something. Usually this is to enter ticket queues faster, or automating some sort of process. But in video games, it usually involves a player using these accounts to cheat, without any risk of being banned themselves. And with Team Fortress 2 being so old and receiving less and less attention from the developers, it was a perfect target. By the end of 2019, players began to notice a large uptick in hackers, but most simply dismissed it. However, this problem got worse. Much worse. And by 2020, it became a full-blown crisis, and Valve didn't seem to be doing much to fix it. If anything, they were making it worse by making decisions such as removing the ability for free-to-play players not being able to use text or voice chat. And with COVID forcing Valve to shut its doors and, like many others, have employees work from home, there seemed to be little hope for TF2. The bot crisis was already a complicated problem, and having to try and fix it while being isolated in your own home is not an enviable position to be in. I certainly think Valve could have done a better job of responding to the bot crisis, but a lot of factors that were out of their control severely hampered them. As October 2020 loomed closer, it was clear that something special was needed to save this game. So did Valve deliver? Well, the short answer is yes. Yes, they did. Okay, it's a tad more complicated than that, but judged by the fact that you're still watching this video and you read the title, Scream Fortress 2020 did revive TF2. After the update was shipped, TF2 hit its then all-time player peak of just over 130,000 concurrent players. But what was so special about this update that it single-handedly revived TF2? Just looking at the patch notes won't give you an answer, because by all accounts it's a pretty standard community-made Halloween update. This isn't to say the update was bad, and it did add some great content. Now, the first reason that contributed to the update's success was the maps. Maps are one of the main reasons why players keep coming back to TF2. Each match on the same map can have wildly different results. Badwater Basin and Upward are arguably the two best maps in TF2 because of this, so it makes so much sense why Valve would eventually add a Halloween version for both. And because they added Bloodwater and Hassel Castle, it drew in players that wanted to see their favorite maps with all the Halloween gimmicks, even if it was slightly overdone in some places. Both are reskins of solid maps, so there's not a whole lot to complain about here. The other two maps, Megaloo and Moldergrove, were also enjoyable Halloween maps, along with some pretty crazy cosmetics. But I mean, that's not a surprise during Halloween. Now, the second reason why Scream Fortress 2 succeeded may be a little controversial. As weird as it sounds, COVID had a huge impact on TF2's resurgence. In a time where many of us were stuck at home, bored for hours on end just waiting for a reprise in the lockdown, video games gave us a way to escape that. And many people came back to this nearly 2-decade-old game because why not? There was nothing better to do. And with Halloween events being cancelled, Scream Fortress was the closest thing some of us got to having a proper Halloween. It sounds silly, but not only did we save TF2 when we needed it most, TF2 also saved us when we needed it most. And this doesn't just apply to TF2. The impact video games had on us during the pandemic was probably the only thing that kept many of us believing during such a dark time. With so many new players trying the game for the first time and veterans making a long overdue return, we saw the TF2 player numbers skyrocket during October. With new content, it brought back players waiting for something to change. It may not have been the most earth-shattering update, but it gave us hope for a future where TF2 would return to its former glory. But this was just the beginning of something greater. The best part about Scream Fortress 2020 was not the event itself, but the shift in attitude from the community. No longer would we stay quiet and wait for the game to die. We saw the impact the community has when we come together. The rising player numbers even got Valve to make a post about the event on their Twitter, something they hadn't done in months. But what about the ripple effect this update caused? Suddenly, there was media attention on TF2 again, talking about the unusually high player count and bringing more attention to the bot crisis. And we actually started to see some more content added seasonally in the following months. We got a much larger Smithmas update than expected, even if some of it was, less than quality. I'm talking about you, Whatville! But Valve really did seem to finally be making some progress again. It wasn't perfect, and they offered nowhere near as much support as they did in the game's golden age, but it was a start. And in 2022, the community started its largest movement yet, #SaveTF2. It was an online campaign that would hopefully get Valve to finally do something about the bots. And it worked. Bot numbers have been on the decline since last year, and Valve has implemented new fixes to combat the problem. None of this would have been possible without Scream Fortress 2020. It inspired the TF2 community as a whole to save the game they loved. Interest peaked, and we've seen the game come back from the brink. Being able to return from the state it was, what the TF2 community managed to accomplish is something few games will ever be able to replicate. The recent summer update would not have happened without the dedication from the community. TF2 may never reach what it was when it was still Valve's favorite child. Counter-Strike and Dota make far too much money for TF2 to ever be able to dethrone them again. But that's okay, because TF2 has entered a new era where we don't need Valve. We've shown that we can come together and make a huge impact on this game. This is just the beginning of a bright future for this historic game, and all of it stems from one singular update. This was how Scream Fortress 2020 saved TF2. Thanks for watching, and happy Halloween.